the person has all of the say in the world. So you can find, one of the most knowledgeable growers out there of a specific thing, or a knowledgeable manager. Let's say we're talking livestock or cattle or whatever the case is. But if they can't explain the message well, it has to they have to articulate the message, and they have to do it. They have to have a positive demeanor about them. There's a lot of people that have a lot of really, really good content and a lot of really informative content. But if you're gonna ask me if I would give them a microphone and let you hear their unfiltered thoughts for 30 minutes, absolutely not. Like,
Yeah.
just because you're very knowledgeable, it doesn't mean you have the right temperament to be explaining this, and a method to be not just farmer to farmer.
Mhm.
You can talk to other farmers that way. But if we're trying to branch out and educate people, I always think to myself, I want a show that, heck, if it's on the background and a 10-year-old is listening to it, there's nothing on there that they're going to take and say in a negative light.
Hello and welcome to Talk Ag to Me, the podcast dedicated to improving ag literacy around the globe. I'm your host, Brandon Black, and in today's episode, we're talking to another ag podcaster friend of mine. I know this is the all-star season, but this is a conversation that we've been trying to have for some time now, so I wanted to bring him on here to kind of be an honorary all-star, even though he's never been on the podcast before. This is the host of the United We Ag podcast, Derek Brazda. Derek, go ahead and introduce yourself to the crowd.
Well, thank you very much for that. As you said, my name is Derek Brazda. I'm the host of United We Ag, and I think, thinking back to how it is we started talking, I think we both kind of had this general idea of what we thought a good podcast should be, and it always just kind of tailored around education. There was no
Mhm.
no kind of gotcha segments. There was no confrontationalism. It was just, let's bring on somebody cool and have a cool discussion. And props to you for being able to do that through college, and now that as you're kind of starting your professional career, it's very cool to see that the evolution that your show's been on for the last well, you're going into your fourth season now, right?
I am. So my fourth season will actually, well, we're technically in my fourth season right now, but kind of breaking the fourth wall. I'll be the podcast will be turning 4 years old in April. So
Well, congratulations, that's a huge feat in and of itself.
thank you. I appreciate that. And yeah, we had some really great conversations, especially when I first kind of started getting into the ag podcaster community. Because I ran my show for a couple of years, just kind of solo, didn't really talk to any other podcasters. And when I first realized that there were other ag podcasts out there, I was really, you know, really excited to see people like like yourself and like Chrissy over at National Ag, National, yeah, National,
Chrissy Wozniak.
yeah.
Yep, over at North American Ag Industry
North American
Connection.
Ag. That's what it was. Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Yeah. So like seeing people like that was just super exciting, and get to talk to them about what potential is out there for ag ed, especially in the podcast realm. Just because you and I both know there's so much more. There's so much more potential for like fun conversations, for cool topics, for interesting guests that are across the world from you. I kind of took a different route than most. I started talking to people outside of the ag industry and kind of picking their brain on what they want to know about ag, and then bringing that information to them in a way that relates to something they would think about on a daily basis, whether it be media or just kind of day-to-day tasks, or anything that's relatable and exciting for them. So it's been really cool to kind of see the growth of the whole ag ed podcast genre. But yeah, I appreciate you saying, it has been fun to see my own podcast grow and change in a variety of ways.
Oh, absolutely. And you hit on some of the fun parts of your show that make it unique, to me at least, is that you are seeking out people that are that are outside of the realm. You're seeking out people that are maybe one thing I like you bring in other podcast hosts from completely non-related topics. And you say, hey, let's talk about some of these. I mean, and some of these they're not simple concepts to go through. And farming, nothing about farming is simple, nothing about agriculture is simple, and there are so many facets to it. And just shining that light to highlight, all right, well, what are some misconceptions that you have? Well, let's talk about them, instead of and it's I won't pick on anybody in particular, but you're on social media just as much as I am, and it
Mhm.
seems like there's just a wall put up a lot of times, and it's put up with the flowery overtones of, here, check out what we're doing, but deep down it's more of, we're gonna, you know it's us versus you, and this is what
Mhm.
we do, and you should just butt out. And that's not the right way to approach it. I know we've talked about that many times, and no, it's definitely a lot of potential, and there's a lot of really cool people. One thing I like most about the ag podcasting community is that there's nobody, at least on the podcast side, there's nobody that's just downright snobby saying, I'm not going to help you. I don't like your show or your concept or what you're doing. And anytime I've ever reached out to anybody for help, or just to bounce ideas off of, or just to say, hey man, you're doing a great job, everybody's just so positive, and that's the fun part about it too.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I've been, I've had nothing but pleasant conversations with podcasters of all varieties. I mean, especially like the ag ed podcasters, or just like some of the more general ag podcasters are just really fun to talk to. A lot of the podcasters that I've become really close with don't come from the ag sector, but they are very very supportive of the idea of it. I've had a number of people say like, man, I, I, I had no idea I wanted to know this. They had this idea of what ag was, and then our podcasts and other podcasts like it kind of bring a new perspective to the table, and they're like, whoa, like, this is cool. But I a lot of people don't realize how interesting that they will find things until until they're exposed to them. It's kind of like that idea of like, they don't know what they're missing.
Oh yeah.
But I think that it's exciting to see. We talked a little bit about before the episode about how like you haven't exactly been in the saddle for a little while, which is perfectly fine because I went through the same thing. But just seeing your podcast and kind of the way that you handle conversations, and how it how it differs than how Chrissy handles conversations or how I handle conversations, like seeing the different perspectives of how all these people who are reaching the same goal are handling the problem in different ways. And so we're covering more ground. It's not just an echo chamber at that point. Now it's kind of like a kind of an ongoing battle that we're all handling in different ways that are all working, but they all have their own special style to them.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why, you can hop from one to the other and not feel like you're repeating yourself. And that, one thing I try really, really hard is to try to not just find that person that's blowing up on social media, or not just find that one, TikTok or Instagram account, and put a microphone in front of them, because you'll see these glow ups happen, and then all of a sudden you'll see 4 or 5 shows that come out, and they're the guest, and they're saying the same exact thing. And I
Mm,
ran into that really early on, and I really tried to listen to it. Was with Jess Peters, actually, from
no.
the she's a dairy farmer from up in Pennsylvania, and I tried to listen to as many of the interviews that she had already given as possible, and try and think of some questions that are different,
Mm,
let's or phrasings that are different, or fun things or conversations that are different, something that she hasn't done 5 or 6 times within the last month. And you don't you know there's a lot more prep that goes into an interview like that, as there's
mhm,
preparation and editing take up 90%, and the actual fun part, what we're doing right now, sitting down actually having the conversation, is the smallest part of the entire process.
mhm.
So it's fun to keep fresh. I know I've got my 5 6 that I check in on pretty regularly. But yeah, it's just a really cool community of people doing really, really fun things.
Yeah, no, it's super exciting, and I hope to see this community grow more and more. See more podcasters kind of try different things. I know we talked about briefly, in older conversations about the potential of kind of creating a, not necessarily a network, but like a a loosely strewn connection of ag ed podcasters that kind of focus on different areas of teaching people about ag, or even learning more about ag themselves. And I think it'd still be kind of a cool idea to have your podcasters that focus on high school students, your FFA members. You have your podcasters that focus on teachers. You have people like myself who focus on the general public, or people who focus more on teaching the industry professionals about different parts. Like all of them kind of having their own place and having the moving parts that work together. And then you have all of them come together on large projects that just kind of just flow smoothly because of the amount of different experiences that they're able to pull to the table. I think it'd be really cool to see.
Oh yeah, I mean you're essentially talking about the Marvel Cinematic Universe of ag podcasting, where everybody kind of has their own superpower or their own little like region that they talk to, or their own fan base, and if we can come together and tie something with a big old bow on it that's presentable to everybody, that's when yeah, that would be awesome.
No, exactly. And that's, like you described it perfectly. It'd literally be like, yeah, the Marvel Cinematic Universe of Ag podcasts. I think that we need to grow a little bit more, not in terms of our personal channels, but just the genre as a whole. We need to get more podcasters out there focusing on these topics to really have that conversation be effective. But I think that, people like we talked about Chrissy, her roundtable was doing fantastic work in that kind of area. And I've been kind of bouncing in and out. One of the things, as dangerous as social media is from what we talked about, there are some really cool advantages there. Like I've kind of had the opportunity to play with Clubhouse, and now Twitter has their whole Spaces thing, and I think Spotify has Green Room. Like they have like these apps that allow for kind of like free flow conversations with just random people that you kind of get set up in a room with. I don't know if you've participated in any of these or if you have experience with these programs, but
I have not. No, I once upon a time, when I so we're also going into to year 3, so a little bit behind you, but I first started happened right in the middle of COVID, where everybody was forcing it. Well, everybody's trying to find a way to get their message out there, whether that
Mhm.
was business, whether that was a podcast, whether that was just your independent social media channels, sharing your experience, and the one thing. I would say that I definitely underutilized was just the power of social media, and exactly like you're talking these spaces. I had a pipe dream one time of doing it, having a Discord server that everybody could hop in on, and that's where I host my show is through Discord, and
Mm.
have like a separate chat room there that you can make public, so that hey, say you really enjoyed this episode, well, 2 weeks later from 5 to 7, this guest will be in here answering your questions in a live chat. Like that was kind of what my hope would be, and nothing ever materialized of it. But it's definitely something to help us, stay connected. I'm bad about it when, especially when I took a little bit of a break from the show. Real life got busy.
Mm.
It's just like with anything else, you've got to take care of real life first, and we were harvesting, and I still have I have a full-time job that I dedicate most of my time to. I have 2 young children, my wife, my family, we're all very, very close. So when when one thing kind of has to fall to the wayside, unfortunately, this time I chose for it to be the podcast. But um, I'm definitely looking to work towards something like that, where it is an interactive community and you can hop in and out when you want to, and you can interact with your favorite hosts, or from my I'll put my selfish cap on, reach out for ideas.
Mhm.
If you have something that you're interested in, here's a real easy place where you have instant access to the host, and make your pitch. Yeah, I think this would be a really cool show. I think this would be a really cool idea. Or hey, I know this farmer, I know this grower, I know this concept very, very well. I would like to be a guest on the show. Because whenever you get people reaching out to you, and it doesn't happen very often to me, but when I do get that message that says, hey, I'm interested, I would really love to be on your show, I'm all for it. That's one of the biggest payouts you can have, is when somebody asks to be a guest on your show, I think.
Oh, absolutely. I share your experience. I haven't had a ton of people reach out. I'm usually the one saying like, "Hey, will you please come on my show?" I kind of
Exactly. I always get hit by the, well, how many listeners do you have? Well, I would have more if you came on. No, I'm kidding.
No, I've definitely had that same experience, but no, you're absolutely right. It's like such like a humbling and like unique, level of excitement when somebody says, "Hey, I really love your show. I think you're doing a great thing. Would you mind if I came on an episode and talked about this topic?" I always love seeing that because I'm like, man, like people are actually thinking about my show outside of just when I tell them about it. That's always a really cool feeling. And I'm hoping that's something that we'll see more of, not just like the whole like people reaching out to us for episodes, because obviously that'd be cool, but that's not what I'm referring to. But that idea of just having a more engaging community, like kind of like you were talking about, more people who are more interactive and kind of helping each other and sharing ideas and shooting us ideas and saying, hey, this would be a really cool idea for an episode if you wanted to do this. I kind of saw that a little bit. So I played with TikTok for a little while with my podcast. I don't know if we talked about this yet. I can't remember what the last thing we talked about was. But I had a TikTok account for my podcast for a while, and I still have it. I just haven't used it in like almost a year now. Um, and I was posting videos, and it kind of didn't really go anywhere. And then one day I posted a video that was talking about the difference between like a cow, a bull, a steer, heifer, the general terms for cattle. And that thing just like overnight, like just went viral. It blew up everywhere. It had like 2 million views. Like it was all over the place, which was really cool. But then I had a bunch of people suggesting me ideas for videos to do, which was really exciting. But I really wish that level of attention had went into my podcast instead of my TikTok, because TikTok was great and all, and I was glad I was reaching a good crowd, but that wasn't the thing that I was investing all my time and energy into. So I was kind of like, thanks for the attention, but go listen to my episodes. Like that's where
Yeah.
the good
No,
information is.
absolutely. Absolutely. And it's like what comes first? Do you make the quality content and then try and market it? Do you build a following and then when you have a group of people that are, consistently checking your content, then you start stepping up content. I mean, it's a struggle. And
Mhm.
for somebody that like yourself and like me that do this, it started off as a hobby. It's very, very part-time. It's not meant to take away from the the rest of our lives, is meant to add to it. And so we have a finite amount of time to dedicate towards all of the work that goes into this. So I get where you're coming from. I've dabbled in TikTok. I've dabbled. I can't tell you what the best place to go is. All I can say about social media is that generally I'm a less happy person when I spend 20 minutes on Twitter,
Yes.
especially on ag Twitter, because
Oh
talk
man.
about some confrontational people, just for
Yep.
the sake of being confrontational. And it's like, oh, I almost don't even want to try. It's
Yep.
like,
No, I'm with you. I've had that, a very similar issue with ag Twitter. Twitter in general is something that I've tried to avoid as much as possible. That's kind of like one of those big social media sites I just kind of never touched. And then like a couple months ago, I was hanging out with a friend of mine who's a podcaster, and he was like, man, you got to get on Twitter. Like if you're gonna have good, content promotion and conversations, you're gonna want to be on Twitter. And I got involved in Twitter for a little while, and I haven't seen major growth in my show. And I've just like you said, I've just kind of had a generally bad time. So I'm not sure that it's necessarily, the best thing to have content promotion. It's a great thing if you want to be depressed all the time, but
oh yeah.
that's
Or if
about
you
all
want
it's
to,
good.
go and yell at somebody.
Right, exactly. But that's about all Twitter is good for, as far as I'm able to tell.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, I'm glad to hear that you've been able to take that very brave choice of taking a break. I know a lot of podcasters, who myself included, very easily burn themselves out on just working on episodes nonstop. So I'm glad to hear you're taking a break. Do you
Oh
have
gosh,
any?
it's easy to do. It's easy to burn yourself out. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't even really know that you're. I would say probably like what I not like one thing happened. It just uh, I had one episode and it was like 2.5 hours long. I was going to split it into two. It was one I was the most excited for. I got all the way done editing it, and then I made the mistake. I was trying to do some work on my computer, trying to free up some memory space, and because like everything was just not running right, and I accidentally removed some of the root audio files that I had used in my editing, and it just completely threw the whole thing up. And I looked at, I mean, I'm talking like 5-6 hours of work over the course of 3 or 4 nights. And I just said, I'm going to fix this, and then it's time to just take a break, get everything else in order, get a solid list of a solid idea of what you want to do going forward, a solid vision, and come back. And
Yep.
that's the hardest thing, is deciding, well, I am going to come back, because I get I have people that are asking me about it. I know that there was interest in the show beforehand. I still have some, I still get that email every week from my hosting site. You had X and X and X listeners. And I'm thinking to myself, well, how is that possible? Because I'm not active on social media. I'm not actively producing any content right now. but there is still a desire to learn about some of this stuff, and there's a desire to learn about, the interesting side of, the unique side of agriculture, not just the, cattle, corn, soybean that you see everywhere. And there's
Mhm.
an interest for especially young people, as you look at that's why I'm so envious of a lot of, well, I shouldn't say envious. I'm very, very, very blessed with everything that I have and everything that's happened with my show, but I'm envious of the demographic that you talk to, because you're talking to younger individuals. You're talking to people that uh you know they could very well hear one of your episodes and decide to dig deeper into agriculture, and they're in a position in their life where they can take a few classes at a school about it, and if they find something that triggers their interest, then that it sets them down the path of what they're going to do for professionally for life. So it's uh there's a lot of value in the messages, and exactly. When I sit down and thought to myself, and my wife was asking me, well, are you even gonna start it back up? I'm like, I am. There's definitely the pros of it outweigh the negatives of it for sure. I just needed a little reset. I needed to get a few other things in order, and now I'm very excited to be behind the microphone again.
That's good. I'm glad to hear that. And like I said, it's very easy to fall into. It's a very podcasting is almost an easier thing to not do than it is to do. It's one of
Oh
those
yeah,
that it's a lot of fun until it's not anymore, and you have to kind of sit there and think, okay, well, if I'm not having fun and if I'm not getting paid, is this really worth sticking with? Um,
absolutely.
and it's a hard choice to make, but like you said, it is a very valuable thing that we're doing here. And I you know I think that I've been fortunate to have some really great conversations and really get people interested in agriculture. But I think that you and some of the other ag podcasters serve a really important role in that. Like I'm doing my best to bridge the gap and get people to even think about ag. And then the idea is hopefully I'll be able to slingshot them towards you guys, and you guys can teach them the in-depth stuff. So if I get very general conversations, right? And like you said, I cover some pretty intense topics sometimes, but for the most part, it's just the idea of kind of planting that seed in their head, getting them, getting to start talking about it, start thinking about it. I had a guest one time that's still a friend of mine. I just recorded with him a couple weeks ago, and he tells me that his little brother listens to my podcast all the time, which is really cool. I had never thought about anyone outside of the guests that I have listening to my podcast, but it's really cool to hear that even the guests that I've had have been sharing it with other people. But that is triggering an interest in kind of like a secondhand interest in other people to look into the information more. So now they're not just listening to my show, now they're listening to your show, or they're listening to other shows that have to do with the same subject, but they're almost like getting a little bit deeper in terms of the kind of content they're talking about, the kind of information they're learning, the more technical terminology they're having to understand. And like you said, that kind of sets them on that path. It's almost like I'm kind of like the gateway into ag podcasting, which I think is I fully accept that responsibility of getting people started, but I want them to keep going and to look into like your guys's kind of shows, because that's really one of the things I really try to push on the show is like, if you like agriculture, I'm just the one that's gonna make it. I'm basically the translator for you. If you want to learn more, go to these guys. Go to these podcasts that have way more information than I do and have way more knowledge than I have.
Well, and and that's well, I mean, it's very kind of you to say. Um It's just a struggle.
It is.
There's no other way to put it. And I'm sitting here kind of racking my brain of, where do I, mine, I think I try to be pretty vague. A lot of times, I'll bring in somebody, will dive very deep on one specific topic. And I think the most important thing for, people in both of our positions is to try to make content that's not by farmers for farmers.
Right.
You know, trying to make content that is, for just anybody. Because there's a lot, and you think of uh, you know, uh, leading people along this path in their education, and to learn about new topics, and then you hit a point where it's almost like two old buddies having an inside joke back and forth, that unless you're really, really living that lifestyle and in that industry, you're not going to have any idea what's going on. And there is a lot of shows like that, or I'll listen to it if there's a guest, but it's definitely not one that I tune into every single week. And it's, again, you have a very strong background in agriculture, so it'd be very easy for you to fall into a hole like that.
Mhm.
And kudos for that, I guess, because
No,
I know I've done it.
yeah, well, I think it's kind of like those are part of the growing pains for a lot of podcasts that kind of focus on the things that we're trying to focus on. I mean, for the first 2 years of my show, it was very much a by farmers for farmers kind of podcast. I mean, I was interviewing nothing but agricultural professionals, and not necessarily, directly farmers, but people involved in production in some level. I interviewed some dairymen. I interviewed some like packing plant workers, some consultants, some architects that work on dairy construction. um and I kind of like branched out a little bit into like ag teachers and ag students, but I really wasn't getting out of the ag sphere very much. And from what I've noticed, a lot of podcasts tend to do the same thing. They have that whole like, well, it's easy to go to the ag people, so I'm gonna go to them first, which is great. I don't think that's a bad thing at all. I think it's really good to have those people on the show, and I still like having ag people on my show. But we just have to find a way to connect to people who aren't from that background and still make them interested in those conversations. Because, like you said, it can be kind of easy to fall into that trap of, just kind of talking to farmers and having them, talk about whatever they're comfortable with, which kind of falls into this, very like ag based jargon that not a lot of common people are just going to want to listen to. Um, and that's nobody's fault. It's just a matter of, there being a communication barrier there.
Oh yeah,
So our
just like
task,
anything.
yeah, exactly. Our task falls to how do we breach that communication barrier and get them interested, and then we can start, kind of having those conversations with farmers and kind of getting them involved in the more in depth industry level stuff. But we got to get them on that, on the same page as us first.
Yeah. So I'm gonna put you on the spot here.
Okay,
Where so your show's been through. I mean, I won't say there's different versions of it, but as you said, when you started off, it was more kind of farmer to farmer content,
sure.
and now that you're branching out and talking to all kinds of different people. What format do you like better?
Ooh, man. It's really tough. My longest episodes, which longest doesn't mean best, but my longest episodes tend to be with the non-ag folks, particularly the non-ag podcasters, um, just because they tend to ask really good questions. Um, so I'll break my demographic into three parts. I guess you can kind of make it four, but I have people from ag backgrounds, and typically those are more industry professionals or teachers or students. I only have a few ag podcasters in that category, and that's why I said you can like almost make it a fourth category, but not kind of. And then I have people who don't come from ag backgrounds that are podcasters, and then I have people who don't come from ag backgrounds and are not podcasters. And they have three very different types of conversations. Like my ag conversations are usually like 30 minutes, and it's very question based and it's very information heavy, and like that's about it. And like my non-ag podcasters, there's a lot of back and forth, a lot of conversation, a lot of interesting questions on both ends. And then my non-ag non-podcasters have like good questions, but they're almost like too nervous to ask them. And so, there's a little bit like, I would say the most exciting conversations I've had comes from that middle category of like the non-ag podcasters. But some of my favorite conversations have been with the ag folks and the non-ag non-podcasters, just because they have like completely opposite perspectives of things, but that makes conversations interesting, right? Because they're going to bring two completely different points to the exact same topic. And I love seeing that sort of thing happen at the conversation. So it's hard to say there's just one group that I love talking to more than any others, just because that, the whole reason I have them all on there is because they're fun to talk to overall. But I think some of the most valuable and some of the most rich conversations I've had have probably been with those non-ag podcasters.
Well, and that's uh understandable, right?
Mm,
Because they know how to ask questions, and they know how to, keep the conversation going. So it doesn't surprise me that that's the longest episodes that you record.
right.
The the other thing, and I'm right here on the cusp. It's on the tip of my tongue, and I'm losing my thought as I'm actually saying it. Um, the one thing that's unique about, I think, bringing in other hosts, I think, so what we try to do in the education part of this is not only explain something or explain a process, but explain the reasoning behind it. so
Mhm.
that, yeah, instead of just saying, oh, we apply this chemical, or these are all the steps and this is the why. There is no there's no unnecessary steps in our process for most guys in their operate or most people in their operations. There's a reason behind all of the things that we do. And just because there are hot button topics out there, and I'm just going to use pesticides because it's something that everybody knows of. There are a lot of people that would just say, well, we have to spray it to protect our profitability. And that's understandable. Not the right method to get your message out there, because we're not trying to just trying to change somebody's mind. You're trying to say, here, I see where you're coming from. I see the thought process that gets you get that got you to hold that position. This is why I do what I do. And hopefully in there's an understanding. And that's how we can reach out to the maximum amount of people, is explain, yeah, we don't want to use pesticides on our crops. On an average year, or a low population bug year, yeah, we're the first ones to cut it out. The only reason that we do it is because A, we have to have supply, and B, that supply has to be healthy by the time you get it. It has to be, still, it can't be rotten. It can't have holes in it. It can't, been gone through a severe drought stress. If it's, say a weed killer that, is sort of, taking moisture from the plant. Like, we don't want to be adding these extra things. We do it out of necessity. And here is why, and here's the necessity. And then it's more disarming, and it's more of how do we solve the problem of the bugs even happening, in the first place, instead of just being, oh, don't use this, or oh, don't use that, or oh, well, we're going to there's a lot of back and forth. And social media is great for that, but it's also can be treacherous for that. So uh,
Right.
being able to frame conversations, and having hosts on that understand how to get the thought process out, instead of just the meat and potatoes of what's happening.
Right. So that kind of begs a question that I'm gonna now I'm gonna put you on the spot. Um, so what do you think is it's kind of a two-part question. So first of all, what do you think is the best approach to how do I want to word this? What do you think is the best approach to kind of bridging that communication gap and kind of establishing that environment to have those conversations? Whether it be like what I'm doing, focusing on those conversations directly with the consumer, or using more general terminology when talking to farmers, or like what do you think is the best approach in that regard? And then on your own show, what are some things that you're hoping to try, some ideas that you have, some things that you've already done, or it's like some new projects coming down the line that you think are kind of exciting that might kind of benefit that goal?
Well, so to answer your first question, the person has all of the say in the world. So you can find, one of the most knowledgeable growers out there of a specific thing, or a knowledgeable manager. Let's say we're talking livestock, or cattle, or whatever the case is. But if they can't explain the message well, it has to they have to articulate the message, and they have to do it. They have to have a positive demeanor about them. There's a lot of people that have a lot of really, really good content, and a lot of really informative content. But if you're gonna ask me if I would give them a microphone and let you hear their unfiltered thoughts for 30 minutes, absolutely not. Like,
Yeah.
just because you're very knowledgeable, it doesn't mean you have the right temperament to be explaining this in a method to be not just farmer to farmer.
Mhm.
You can talk to other farmers that way. But if we're trying to branch out and educate people, I always think to myself, I want a show that, heck, if it's on the background, and a 10-year-old is listening to it, there's nothing on there that they're going to take and say in a negative light. It's
Mhm.
education, it's fun, it's lighthearted. It's ag is a big community, and it's a community that, fortunately for everybody, there is no gates to get in. You can be involved with ag just by planting a garden, by buying a house plant, and paying attention to it as it physiologically matures, and taking care of it. There are so many very basic entry level ways to get into agriculture, and that's why it's so fun. So the right person with the right temperament is 100% the answer to your and I know that probably not the answer that you're listening or that you're hoping for, but it's the truth. You know, finding somebody that shares the idea, shares the vision, and shares the positivity.
Yeah.
As far as going into this next season, one thing probably that I'm most excited about is I've reached out to some people that are very both with the historical society and very. I want to do a series, and it's not going to be every show. Maybe it's every third show or every fourth show or whatever. But it's some of the content that I'm getting right now, so I can space it out. But a very basic, brief overview of just the history of modern agriculture, starting way back in the Mesopotamian era, where how did things start? How what were the very first primitive tools and methods that we were doing? And I did one on the history of irrigation with a gentleman from Israel who lived it. That's where irrigation was essentially founded. Thousands of years ago. You can trace back tools. So that's probably the thing for this season I'm most excited for, is digging in and giving people kind of that hardcore history feel, but talking specifically about agriculture. Because in my opinion, that's how you can find somebody that's just an avid historian, has no idea about agriculture, and oh, well, this is actually really, really interesting. And how did we get from roaming around the caves to now this big announcement at CES, more autonomous tractors, on a commercial scale for, there are people that I know that will probably have one of these things implemented within the next couple of years. So this is real life. It's not just in a magazine anymore. And um, so that is definitely what I'm most excited for going forward for this next upcoming season, is dig into the history of ag.
That's super cool. That's one of my absolute favorite topics to dive into. Talking about the agricultural revolutions, the like you mentioned, Mesopotamia, and like kind of the foundation of the first idea of agriculture, the invention of the earliest tools, and then tractors, and then like there's this thing I've been kind of pushing on the podcast for a little while that is kind of speculative, that I've been kind of theorizing about for a while, but um in your studies over the history of agriculture, you're going to find out about the revolutions of agriculture, obviously, right? You have your first revolution, kind of the invention of agriculture; the second revolution, the creation of tools, which branches all the way from like the earliest plow to the tractor. And then you have their third revolution, which is the chemical revolution, or the green revolution, right? That's fertilizers, pesticides, all that kind of fun stuff. um, I've been kind of theorizing that we're in the middle of two separate revolutions that are happening simultaneously. One of them is what I believe should be called the kind of the fourth revolution, the automated revolution. We're having autonomous tractors, we're having drones, we're having more precision ag, a lot more tech based stuff that's more than just what we had before. But now it's not only automated but much more precise and efficient, and increases, like it's almost like the futuristic level of farming.
Mhm.
So the automated revolution is one that I think is a big one, and the other one is kind of the opposite, but it functions simultaneously and almost more effectively if combined with the automated industry, which is the kind of the regenerative. I call it the regenerative revolution, but that's not quite the most effective way of describing it. Is basically looking at the soil, having a better understanding of soil health, using more effective methods combined with new technology to benefit the farm, and kind of give back to the environment that we're farming. So it adds to the soil and to the environment and to the general atmosphere of the farm, while utilizing modern technology, which makes it different than our earliest versions of regenerative agriculture. But I can go on that forever. That's anytime I hear history of ag, I automatically go revolutions. Like
Oh
there's
yeah, I mean, I mean, I think an apt description of it would be like maybe like a biological
sure.
revolution,
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
an ecological revolution, because
Yeah,
there are a lot of efficiencies, there are a lot of things that we've been able to do in modern ag that have allowed us to say, okay, we have production somewhat stabilized, or somewhat for a specific region. I'm not talking everywhere in the world, but for a specific region we have production. Now it's time to start looking into efficiencies, and to we've thrown around, as an industry, we've thrown around the word sustainable for 15 years, and everybody
hmm
you talk to has a different definition of what sustainable means. Now we're putting our money where our mouth is, and we're saying, all right, what does it truly mean to be sustainable? And where I see people taking it is that, they're getting involved with the IoT, they're getting involved with automation, they're getting involved with biologicals, and actually monitoring what's happening to the soil on like a you know subatomic level almost. It
Mhm.
feels like. So I couldn't agree with you more, and it's a very interesting path, and that's why, that's where I'm hoping. I work in the IoT and the environmental monitoring with all the, the sensors and the technology side for my full-time job. So I get to see a lot of the implementations of the new technology and see what's kind of coming down the pipeline. And another really big market for us, and doesn't matter what you're growing, is the carbon revolution. How are we
Mhm.
going to monetize carbon and figure out what do we even need to track? That's the
Right.
stage we're at right now. It's, yeah, everybody wants to get paid for their carbon offsets, but what is the quantifiable evidence, and how are you going to track it?
Mhm.
And there are a lot of people that are a lot smarter than me, working on problems like that right now. So it's, hopefully you would say we'll culminate at the end of the year with a future of ag episode, and maybe make that a couple hour long one, and bring yourself in to talking uh some other podcast hosts to kind of summarize how we saw the year. I think that'd be a really fun project.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. That'd be really cool. Especially, like you mentioned, getting almost like a roundtable style conversation about, how the industry looks, how the future of it looks, the podcasting side of things, the education side of things. Like there's so many things that could be covered in one conversation alone, just over, I mean, especially as we begin to see more optimization in both the technological side of production, but also like the communication side of this conversation. There's going to be a lot of new things to add to the table. So I think that'd be really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
But awesome. Well, yeah, I'm excited to hear about that. Ag history is one of my favorite subjects. So I'm very excited to hear, what you come up with and what interviews you get out there and what information you find.
Well, I might have to lean on you then for ideas, and for just general oversight going forward. So we'll start this network now.
All right, that sounds good to me. I mean, hey, I'm ready to start the Ag MCU whenever you are.
I'm gonna have to introduce you to Brent Adams over at Tractors and Troubadours. He'd get a kick out of that one too.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I'm always looking for more contacts in the ag podcasting or ag communications field. It's always a lot of fun.
So do you have a handful of shows that you listen to other than your own?
There's a few. I a lot of the shows I listen to are kind of like indie style like podcasts that are from just like friends of mine. Not as many ag ones, but there are a few ag ones that I've been kind of keeping in contact with lately.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to say I listen to more of them than I do, but I've got a handful, and I can't even say I listen to them regularly, because a lot of times if I'm traveling, I'm a big audiobook guy.
Yeah.
I listen to a lot of books. Plus I'm on the phone a lot, so
Yeah.
sometimes it's like when you're on an hour-long drive and you have four different phone calls on it, then everything gets kind of chopped up and hard to follow. But
Yeah. No, I would like to listen to, podcasts more in general. I used to listen to them all the time. I mean, like that was all I listened to was podcasts. And I kind of got, off the trails on that one. I've been listening to just YouTube videos lately. I put on live streams and listen to those while I work on stuff. And it's just kind of,
mhm,
my podcasts, because like the thing is with a podcast, like I'm not the kind of person that can just casually listen to podcasts. I want to pay attention to what I'm listening to.
yeah,
And when I'm working, I can't pay attention to, I can't do both. So like if I'm driving around, I might throw one on, but typically I kind of just want to relax with music at that point.
yeah.
So it is hard, but I've been trying, I've been kind of getting myself back into the habit of listening to them again, mostly to support my friends, but also to get some more ideas for episodes and more inspiration and that kind of stuff. So
Well, I mean, it's fun to, like you said at the beginning of the show, just kind of hear how other people do things,
mhm.
and maybe say, well, I could incorporate some of this stuff, and I see this would be a fun segment to do. So it's definitely fact finding and informative, and yeah, I again, I wish there were more hours in the day where I
Yeah.
had just like undistracted time to pay attention to things.
Yeah. No, definitely. I mean, there are a few that I like to shout out a lot just because I think they do a good job of kind of connecting, to every type of audience available. So I mean, like, and a couple of them are ones that either you introduced me to or that I've seen you're also acquainted with. So you have like obviously, Chrissy over at North American Ag. She does a really good job and she has a really interesting show. And then, have like one of my favorites is Ag State of Mind with Jason Meadows.
Yep.
He's got a fantastic show. I don't,
Boy, that guy's a machine.
oh man, he never stops. Like,
He never like he's got cattle, he's a
mhm.
pharmacist, he's got like 25 kids that are always on the go. And I know not that many. I think he's got four.
Yeah.
But I mean, he never misses a show. His show's always really, really good content.
Hmm.
I mean, uh, I've sent some people to contact him, and it's like, oh yeah, we're gonna record something next week. I'm like, man, I don't know how you find the time. Then he's doing public speaking too. He's a
Hmm.
very impressive guy. Very, very impressive show. So yeah, I mean, he deserves a shout out
Oh
for
yeah. No,
for
Jason's phenomenal. He,
you know,
um,
another good one. I can't remember his actual name, but that guy that runs the Farm Traveler does a really good job.
oh yeah, I've been meaning to listen to that one. I've been told about it a few times. I haven't gotten to it yet.
He's good. And then um I mentioned him here a few minutes ago, Brent Adams.
Hmm.
Brent Adams, he would be a good one, being a journalism intern yourself, or not intern, a new journalist
Hmm.
in the industry, because he's a journalist first and agriculture second. But I mean, his show is a little bit of everything. It's where I would go to get my agricultural news. It's where I go to hear about fun stories. He has a lot of really strong ties to the music community in Nashville, so he brings on a lot of up and coming, new country singers that are, flying under the radar, to do some live streams with him. And yeah, he's just a really fun guy, and he was actually probably my biggest mentor starting this and running it. And he's probably the one that has kept me going, and when when I've been like, you know what, it's just not worth it anymore. And he just has a really fresh look and outlook on how to do things, and he's taught me a lot about broadcasting in general. So he's got a really high quality show that he puts out,
That's
and
awesome.
he's always available to answer questions, or collaborate on things. So Brent's a really good one to follow.
Well, we're currently in my fourth season, but I'm working on fifth season stuff right now, and my fifth season is all about ag ed and ag communications, and connecting with other ag podcasters and stuff. So that might be kind of a fun episode to bring him on for that.
Oh,
Or
he's been on mine. He's been on my show before. So he's an interesting guy. A lot of knowledge.
yeah, that sounds like it. Kind of have to at that point. Yeah, with the amount of stuff you talk about.
Oh yeah, you have to have your thumbs on everything constantly.
Hmm.
So
That's awesome. Well, yeah, I mean, if you can get me connected with him, that'd be awesome, and we can start getting the ag MCU kind of put together. Um, but no, I think that's super cool.
I can already see the t-shirts.
Yes, the merch potential is endless. We have an infinity gauntlet. It just has like the emblems of each of our podcasts in it.
Oh, that'd be fantastic. Then
Uh,
we'll have to pass it around every year.
yes, yeah, that'd be perfect. But no, we'll get started on that soon. I have a lot of ideas that we'll have to trade around, and want to give you time to kind of get back get back in the saddle and kind of get yourself ready. Don't want to rush anything, but
No, absolutely. I mean, well, I need a little bit of a kick in the behind every once in a while, especially when it comes to this, because yeah, it's definitely you know definitely worthwhile once it gets
mm,
going. It's just all the legwork to get it up and going is where I'm at. So
right.
we're slowly chipping away at it, and we'll be ready for tickling your earbuds soon.
Excellent. Well, I mean, hey, there's nothing wrong with taking breaks. I actually just did an episode with Jason, from over at Axiate of Mind, and him and I talked about that for a while because, despite popular belief, he actually does take a rest every now and then. But yeah, he talked about that after his last tour. He had to take a little break from podcasting, and he told me that apparently his son does his editing, and his wife like did some networking for him. So like he's got the whole family in on it, which is like I'm super jealous of that. Like I would love to have my whole family in on my podcast, but it's just not in the cards for me, I guess.
Yeah, I'm like visualizing the conversation, how that would go with my wife, if I said, all right, I need you to go out and start editing. And oh yeah, by the way, here's when I have open, go ahead and just schedule me some interviews, but make sure you vet the people first. So it's,
Right.
yeah, that would go over well.
Right. But no, he's an impressive specimen. But yeah, even he was, saying saying, everyone needs a break at some point. So it's definitely, I mean, I've taken plenty of breaks with my show. It's definitely a good thing to do. But
Mm.
yeah, so I mean, I think that kind of wraps up all the stuff I had to talk about. I don't know if you have anything else you want to add, or if you want to remind everyone where they could find your show.
Well, yeah, I'll do that. I do have a couple of things that kind of come up here. I know you said um, you had mentioned, we talked a little bit about the future of what's going on with mine, and we talked a couple of times about season 4 and season 5. But tell me, what can I expect from you?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a good question. So, we're currently recording for one of the last episodes of season 4. So, season 4 is my all-star season. It's where I bring back all of my favorite guests, or in your case, honorary guests, people who I've had conversations with that very easily could have been episodes. We just weren't recording at the time. So bringing them on and kind of just having, just general kind of fun catch-up conversations. This season has kind of been a vehicle to promote some of the new stuff that came out for the podcast, like the website, the merch store, some of the new ideas that are kind of being floated around. um, so yeah, it's kind of just like a fun way to catch up with some old friends. I have some friends of mine that are retiring from podcasting, so I kind of wanted to get them back on and have them talk about their shows before they leave. So that was kind of fun. And then season 5, season 5 originally had a theme that I wanted to do for season 4, and I pushed it off because I didn't think I'd have time. And then I pushed it off again because now I have a new idea for season 5. So the original season 5 is going to be season 6. It's like the Star Wars
Man,
timeline.
oh
It's going to
man,
be
you're
but yeah, so season 5 is going to be my kind of, I call it my back to roots episode, or back to roots season. So it's going to be about going back to talking to my ag industry based people like I did with my first season, having more conversations about better ways to educate the public and to kind of connect people to agriculture. And so that's going to be a bit of a shorter season, but it's going to have a lot more like ag podcasters and other ag industry people to kind of really get some fun conversations going about that. I might do some little like tech showcases here and there just because I used to love doing those. So that's season 5. And then season 6 is going to be ag around the world. So I'm going to be getting guests from all different countries to talk about, ag in their country, how it functions, and then like from the consumer point of view, what their perspective is on ag in their country.
awesome.
So,
Well, yeah, let me know when you come around to booking people for that, because I have a that was still is. I mean, always kind of a part of the vision is showcasing unique ag from around the world. So my team is we're pretty small and we're very international. So if I can help facilitate you meeting anybody from around the world, just let me know.
oh man,
I'd love to
I could
love to
use
give you
that.
some context of some people to talk to.
Yeah, no, that'd be fantastic. I've been trying, I have a few connections in some different countries. I have some friends in Australia, some in Ireland, but I could definitely use some contacts for some other countries because I've been struggling a little bit to get some friends in that area.
Absolutely.
So awesome. Well, yeah, I'm kind of in a I kind of run into the problem of like I'll work myself until I'm about to pass out, and then I will take a break and like right when I'm like I need to keep working, I'll run out of ideas. As soon as I take a break, all of a sudden I have a ton of ideas, and I'm like, oh, I want to work on stuff, but no, I'm on break, so I have to like force myself to relax. So I have ideas for episodes on end. I just need to give myself time to actually get them done and not try to rush them all out at once.
Oh, I know. It's
So
you're still young and full of energy, so
yeah, so I
Ar
mean that's been my thing, but well, I didn't mean to cut you off. Sorry, what were we gonna say?
no, no, I was just gonna say, are you willing to say on air what's been some of your favorite episodes so far?
Oh, sure. I've had this conversation a couple times on other people's podcasts, as well as my own. Man, it's really hard to say. It really depends on the context because I have some episodes that were really fun. I have some episodes that I was really impressed by, just like the amount of information or the guests. And I've had some episodes that were just like, you know, just in general, I was really excited for leading up to. So I mean, like one of my most fun episodes was a guest of mine during my third season, I want to say. So a few months ago, her name's Natasha. She's phenomenal. Her and I did a whole episode on Star Wars and agriculture, and it was so much fun. It was like an hour and a half, one of the longest episodes I ever did. We just sat there and we talked about all the different like planets of Star Wars and like, okay, well, how could they sustain farming? Okay, well, they can't, so they must go here to do it. Like it was like this whole like conspiracy theory level like there's yarn all over our walls, like we're taping things, like trying to figure out how ag would work in Star Wars. So that was a really fun one just because of the goofiness of it. um I had an interview with Temple Grandin. That was one of my earliest interviews in my first season. That was really like, I was nervous as heck the entire time. So like the quality of my questions was not great, but I was super excited just to have her on the show. So that was a really fun one. Um,
That was kind of your that that seemed like a kind of a turning point for you
mhm.
almost. I mean, that was your I'm official. I'm gonna do this. I mean, because she's a very very good speaker
Mhm.
and probably one of the smartest people that I've ever heard talk.
Right.
Just I mean, she's just intelligent and she's very personable to
Yeah.
listen to.
No,
And
she's phenomenal.
that was a really cool. I was hoping you'd say that was one. I think that's probably one of my favorite one of your episodes is the Temple Grandin one.
Yeah, I mean that's everyone I talk to, like that's like their go-to is like, man, the Temple Grandin episode has to be your best one. And like I think it was a really good episode. I'm just the only reason that's not like top of my list is because of my quality during the episode. Like I'll re-listen to the episode and be like, man, this is such a good episode, but I sound terrible. Like you could tell I'm nervous the entire time. So
It's
it
easy to be overly critical of yourself.
yeah.
I've learned to stop listening to the sound of my voice.
Yeah, so that is definitely one of my favorites just because of the raw, like I Temple Grandin's been one of my idols since I was like 13 and I first started taking interest in livestock. So that was a huge one for me. And then I'd say probably my most successful episode, and one of the episodes, actually the episode that I have listened to the most, I re-listen to this episode all the time, was with Kevin Kwan. It was my first interview of the podcast. Because my first 3 or 4 episodes were just me, and when I had co-hosts, it was just my co-host and I just talking about general topics. Kwan was my first like official interview, and he was my ag teacher at the time, and he was the biggest supporter of the podcast. He was kind of my mentor through all of this. And a few months after his episode came out, he passed away. And so I reposted his episode as kind of like a way of like closure for myself
Yeah.
and for all of his family, and everyone listened to his episode. And that, like, to this day, it's like none of my episodes have come even close to touching that episode in terms of views. And I'm glad. I want that episode to stay in my top just because it's done so much for the community and for myself, and I still listen to it when I need motivation and kind of need a kick in the butt to get going and start working on things again. So it's that one has definitely served me the most. But it is a hard one to listen to just because a lot of us still miss him.
Yeah. Well, I mean that's it's powerful stuff, but it's so important that you have that and you will always have that,
Hmm.
that piece of audio that you can turn back to and you like you said when you need some motivation or you need to feel good or you just in a mood and you need to hear some comforting old words from somebody who, you look up to.
Yeah.
That's the power of doing this. I've, been able to talk to people that I never would have dreamed I'd be able to talk to and go back and reference some things. And I mean, it's an intangible part of this when you are sitting there thinking, oh, well, am I going to come back? Am I really going to, put myself through this? Am I going to dedicate the time, to make sure that it stick to a schedule? And then you hit an episode or a couple episodes or something like that. And it makes it all kind of worth it.
Yeah, definitely. Um, are you comfortable? Like, do you have any episodes that you like to kind of
Oh
share
my
about?
gosh,
What?
yeah. I don't think I'll make anybody mad. I mean, my top one that I've done, it definitely is I had the chance to record with some biologists from NASA that are directly in charge of the programs that are teaching the astronauts and developing the technology to grow tomatoes and vegetable and peppers in outer space on the International Space Station. And it was really cool because when we recorded it, gosh, I kind of just I sent a message to somebody. I found somebody from the PR team's name on some website. I can't remember. I spent like 2 hours searching it. I finally found it, and they got back to me like the next day and started this process of going back and forth and talking about what we're letting them know what we're going to talk about. And then I had the ability to connect with the two biologists, and it was just like it was just awesome to have that conversation. It was awesome to learn about the inner workings of NASA as they're preparing for these, and to learn that the lady in charge of it, Dr. Joy Amasa, got her inspiration from an overly zealous FFA teacher, and she still actively supports FFA, and it's a great message for, people that maybe didn't come from a farm that want to be involved. Now, she went from just being interested in plants and being a part of her FFA to, running a division at NASA that is overseeing biology on the space station. You can do anything that you want to do. You just gotta find that passion, and you gotta go forward. And I'm like thinking through the other episodes that I mean, there a lot of them are a lot of fun. I think my most interesting one, as far as the recording process goes, and just, my reaction to it is, I had this professor. I got this book, and it's called The Geology of Vineyards, and it's all about terroir. And is it real? Is it not real? Is it a marketing ploy? So I reached out to the guy that wrote the book on it, literally wrote the book on terroir, and he agreed to come on the show. He's a gentleman from Wales. And so when we set the recording, it was at, like, I think it started at 6 a.m. my time, in the middle of the day for him. And so I'm on here, tired. It's early in the morning. And the guy who was editing my show was on there. And I told him, I go, just make sure that everything sounds good, and that, um, we're all set for editing. And this guy, the very first thing he says when I hit record is, I'm just going to, I'm going to lecture for a little bit at the beginning. So just let me,
Mm.
don't interrupt me. Essentially, a very, very nice way of saying that. And then this guy just ranted for like 45 minutes. Like, I mean, he's a college
Wow.
professor, and he just gave a lecture for 45 minutes. And then he opened it up to ask for questions. And I was 99% convinced that my editor on the other end of the line was sleeping at this point, because he just had a very, I mean, he had a lot of good inflection, but just a very, poor connection to the microphone,
Uh,
and a very thick Welsh accent.
yeah.
So he's talking about all these very, very, complex concepts between, different minerals in the soil equating to the flavor of the wine. And then he opens it up for questions, and it just was like a 3-hour ordeal that early in the morning. And I remember that one always sticks out to me. I ended up breaking it into 2 episodes, and one is just the history of wine, and then the other one is, is terroir a real thing? Can soil composition actually, affect the flavor of the, and it's not just soil, it's all over environment. So it's not just soil. when
Yeah.
you, when they say the word terroir, it's a very blanket term. But that was another really, really fun one, to do. Those
That's
are probably the
awesome.
two that stick out the most to me.
Yeah. No, I mean, those are really interesting topics. And it's always fun when you get to hear something that you're like passionate about, or you have like a burning question about, just to hear someone just talk about it. You're just like, man, this is exactly what I was looking for, like
Oh
something
yeah.
just kind of clicks.
And like, I didn't mind the lecture. I was enthralled by it, but then I
Yeah.
started looking at the clock, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this guy is he's still going. He's still going." And then, he had told me at the end, he's like, "I've got another lecture on the history of whiskey if you want to
Oh
do that."
man.
I'm like, "I definitely do, but we'll touch base in a year or so."
Yeah. I gave it some time for people to settle into this one first.
Yeah.
That's awesome. No, I definitely, I've had some guests that have done that before. I had a guy come on that we talked about the history of agriculture in terms of US history, I think. And he lectured for a solid probably 30 minutes. And I mean, it was good information, but similar to you, it was like okay, can we move this along a little bit? You've been talking for some time now, but
Oh yeah. And at the end of the day, we decided to just let him go, because
yeah.
I mean, he knew what he was gonna say. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, he'd given that lecture probably 100 times before, and it was riveting, I thought. So if you're
That's
gonna
awesome.
if anybody is looking for a fun place to start, if you're interested in the show, you can find it anywhere, Spotify, iTunes, uh, iHeartRadio, all of the main players, where you listen to podcasts. And yeah, those two would definitely be a fun place to start: the farming in space and history of wine.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I'll definitely. I mean, my roommate is an enology major, and he's all into wine, so I will definitely send that one to him. He'll love that. Um, but that's yeah, cool. I'll share those around. I'll put your links down in the description so people can come find your show. And I'm kind of notorious for sharing podcasts that I listen to or that friends of mine produce. So I will definitely be sharing your podcast around quite a bit.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, my pleasure. I think again, I think that kind of wraps up everything I had to talk about. If you have anything else to like to add, you're more than welcome to.
No, I appreciate you sticking with it for as long as you have. I appreciate you inviting me to be on the show. I know we've talked about this for probably a year, and now it's finally happening. So I'm excited.
Yeah.
I'm excited to get going again and to see where our partnership can take us.
Yeah, for sure. No, I'm also really excited. I've been excited about this, since our first conversation. So like you, I'm very glad that we're able to finally make this connection, make the first, this is like Iron Man 1, the very beginning of our of our
I
teamwork
ca-
here, but
let's
um,
just keep building that
yeah.
visual here. I got to pick who I want to be.
Perfect. But yeah, no, I'm very excited to see where our collaborations go, and as we kind of build this, this team of ag podcasters, and overall just kind of improve the ag communication sector overall. So, yeah, I think that kind of wraps everything up for me. If you don't have anything else, then I think we're good to go.
Not at all, man. Thank you very much. Take us out.
Yeah. So thanks again so much for joining me for this episode. It was a lot of fun. I will link all your links down in the description so people can come find your show. Once again, this is Derek from United We Ag. Thanks to all my listeners for tuning in and for always supporting me over the years. It's been a lot of fun, and the whole point of this show or this season was to get in touch with all my friends I've made through this great experience. So I'm glad I've been able to do that. So thanks again to all of you so much. I'll catch all of you next week, and don't forget, if you ate today, thank a farmer.